ठीक है, I'm sharing my screen. Let me know once you are able to see my screen. दिख रहा है? ओके. सो जैसे कि अगर हम बात करते हैं मैन्युफैक्चरर की, और जैसे कार है, ठीक है. सो होंडा सिटी एक कार है, होंडा एक मैन्युफैक्चरर है, करेक्ट. और सिटी उसका मॉडल है, ठीक है. तो ब्रॉड कैटेगरी वो कार में आते हैं, सब टाइप्स ऑफ कार. और भी आ जाएगी, महिंद्रा एक मैन्युफैक्चरर है, थार उसका एक मॉडल है ना. सो ऐसे ही जो ब्रॉड टॉपिक है वो ORM है, ठीक है. ORM स्टैंड्स फॉर ऑब्जेक्ट रिलेशनल मैपिंग. ऑब्जेक्ट रिलेशनल मैपिंग. सो और मार्केट में बहुत सारे ORMs अवेलेबल हैं. उसमें जो सबसे ज़्यादा फेमस यूज होने वाला है वो हाइबरनेट है. इट इज़ नॉट द ओनली ORM, देयर आर मेनी ORMs इन द मार्केट. Hibernate is one of the ORM. Okay, Eclipse Link is another ORM. Okay, and there are many more. Okay, so what ORM actually does is it takes the state of an object. So if I have a student class, okay, if I have a student class which has attributes such as roll number, name and percentage, correct. So I make an object of this class student. So that student class object will have these attributes. So I have an object, so it will have roll number 18, name is anything, Virat, and percentage 78.5. Now this object which is made, okay, let's call it as student1. We can map it to a database row. So this student can be mapped to a row in the database. So that database table will have how many columns? 3 columns. And each of the attribute, so the class name will be mapped to the name of the table. So what will be the table name? Student. And each property of that class, roll number, name and percentage, will be mapped to individual columns. And this record, this object, this is the object, right? And this is the relational database. So we will map this record to the relational database. This is called as ORM. So now this object has now become persistent, means long lasting. So I have saved the state of this object in the database. Now even after few days, few weeks, few years, I want to fetch this data, I can always fetch it back. This is called as ORM. And Hibernate helps us to achieve this ORM. Now how Hibernate helps us to achieve this? So we have to first make a factory, okay, a session factory. So session factory is a superset. In that session factory you can create many sessions, one session, two session, blah blah blah, as many you want you can create, but they are very heavyweight objects, will occupy a lot of resources. So if not in use, don't create them and close them immediately after usage. So this is the session factory. Session factory I will use to create what? Session object, session 1, session 2, and blah blah blah. I can have more sessions also. Okay, now these session each have their internal cache memory where they can store the objects. Each session has its own what? Session cache. Okay, so that it is their internal memory. So each will have its own session cache. So once the object is created, we pass this object to the session. And now it is the responsibility of the session to store this object in the database. So it will do both the task, store also and will fetch also. As programmers, what is our responsibility? Create the object and give it to whom? The session. Session factory we use to create sessions. So this is one time. Session factory is the mother which will give birth to the sessions. So with using this we can create the sessions, and once we have the session, the entire now game will be played with the sessions. So session factory, they reside inside the sessions, reside inside the session factory. So that's why we create the session factory first. Okay. Now once we have the session factory and we have made the session, then we will create our object and give it to the session, and storing the object in the database or fetching it from the database will be done by the session. Programmer will be relieved from the headache of JDBC queries. So you can say ORM is a layer, a wrapper on top of JDBC. So in JDBC I have to write the query myself, everything. So your ORM is one wrapper on top of your JDBC. Okay, so your Hibernate is a wrapper on top of JDBC. Then on top of Hibernate, we will study in Spring Boot. There is one more layer that is called JPA. That we will study when we do Spring Boot. Okay, that is JPA, Java Persistence API. Stands for Java Persistent APIs. So, okay, so now have you all got the idea as to why we are studying Hibernate? Okay, it's an ORM. Is it the only ORM in the market? Many. A company can have its own custom ORM also. So if you join a company, you will see that they have their custom ORM, which looks quite similar to Hibernate. Okay. So let me give you all some now theoretical understanding of ORM. Okay. Hibernate as an ORM. Okay. See, the state of an object in Java is temporary, correct? So if I create this object in Java, I run the application, I stop the application. What happens to this object? Vanish, right? So the state of the object is temporary. So if I want to make it permanent, I can store it into the database. Okay. We store the object state in a relational database by mapping the object to a database row. Okay. Invented by Gavin King 2001. Hibernate is an ORM. ORM stands for object relational mapping. Okay. Object in Java is mapped to a row in a database table. It is open source, that is available for everyone without any cost. It is non-invasive. What is invasive style of programming? Invasive, it insists and enforces that you should extend a class or implement an interface, correct? So yes, Hibernate is non-invasive. Hibernate will not insist that you extend a particular class or implement an interface, nothing. It is lightweight. Its job is only with regards to communication with the database. That is what Hibernate is all about. It will not take any other aspect into consideration. So its features are limited only to the database communication part. So that's why it is lightweight. It does not contain additional functionalities. It uses only those functionalities required for object relational map. Okay, it's high performance. So this improves a lot of performance. So we'll study this in detail. What is caching? I gave you an idea just now, a rough idea. What is lazy initialization? All this improves the performance when we use cache, when we use Hibernate. Okay. So we have two types of fetch type, eager and lazy. We'll study this in detail. This is database independent. It is not dependent on any database. So this database which you have over here, relational database, can be of any manufacturer. If you want to use Oracle, you use Oracle. If you want to use MySQL, use MySQL, use Postgres. Irrespective whichever database vendor you want, you can use. It is database independent. Okay. We just have to provide a dialect. What we have to provide? Dialect. So with which database we are using in our program, we have to give the appropriate dialect. So if I am using Oracle, I will give what in my database? Oracle dialect. What this dialect will do is, integer in Java should be mapped to what type of column in MySQL. The dialect will specify. So should we map integer to a integer? Should we map it to a number? Should we map it to a numeric? Or is there any other data type specific for integer? So this data type mapping is specified by the dialect. Okay. So there might be a reason that there is a MySQL version. So let's say MySQL version 5, and then there's MySQL version 8. So they both have their own dialect. So we have a dialect for 5 for MySQL 5, and we have dialect 8 for MySQL 8. Maybe MySQL 8 has introduced some more data types which can do mapping more easily. So maybe a string which was mapped to a varchar in MySQL 8, that whatever string in Java, map it to what type in your MySQL varchar. Then in MySQL 8 they have bought a text data type. Have you observed? So now the mapping can be done to this. So whatever string is there in Java is mapped to what type in MySQL. So all this mapping. So similarly in Oracle there might be some different data type. Postgres might have a different data type. Yes or no? So that all is mentioned by the dialect. So you just have to mention the dialect, so it will understand the communication. Okay. See, these are all the various ORMs: Hibernate, Top Link, MyBatis, Eclipse Link, Persism. These are all different various ORMs. Okay. Now these are all advantages of Hibernate over the traditional JDBC. In traditional JDBC, whatever query I had to write of insert, the programmer would write the query, right? Remember when we were doing prepared statement? So we would write the query insert into here. No need to write the query, just create the object, give it to the session. The session has a function to save the record. You will call which function? Save method, and it will save the record in the database. No need to write any query. No need to write select query, just call the get method or the load method. Which methods? Either of them you can use. We'll see the difference between them. So now the programmer is relieved with writing the query that all is wrapped under the Hibernate. So we will interact with the Hibernate. Behind the scenes, Hibernate will do JDBC. So behind the scenes, queries will be executed, but the programmer doesn't have to write that. Okay. So Hibernate is a layer on top of JDBC. So behind the scenes, it will still execute all the queries, SQL queries, but the programmer will not do that. So when we run the code, you will see on the console that all it is doing like JDBC. It is displaying the queries over there. SQL queries will be displayed. When I execute the save query, you will see on the console it is writing the insert query for us. Okay. So now all the queries handling is done by the Hibernate. I will not do it manually. Okay. So Hibernate has a ORM support. It converts object into database tables and rows. JDBC there is no ORM. There are caching level. So there are multiple level of cache. First level cache, each session has its cache, that is called as first level cache. So what is first level cache? Each session has its own cache. Then the factory also has its cache, that is called as second level cache. Okay. So if I implement only first level cache, it will look for that object only in this session. One session does not have access to another session. But if I implement second level cache, I can search for that object in the entire factory. Okay. So this will make the performance faster. It also has its own query language called as HQL, Hibernate query language, and JDBC uses SQL, right? Okay. Then database independent. Hibernate is not dependent on any databases. Okay. JDBC also is database independent, but the query changes from one database to another database, correct? So I have to manage that. Here I have transaction management. Transaction management means if I have a set of query 1, query 2 and query 3, and they are performing one task. These three collectively when executed will perform one task, like transferring money from account A to account B. So there are two statements. One statement will be minus from account A, second will be plus to account B, right? So these two statements is forming one transaction. So if this statement is success, money is deducted, and if this statement is failed, that money has not been deposited. So what happens? This transaction also is rolled back, correct? This statement also is rolled back because it is forming one single transaction. They are not independent SQL queries. They are forming one transaction. So if any failure, will roll back the other query also. So that can be done in Hibernate. There is transaction management. To increase the performance, lazy loading. Okay, as I mentioned over here, I'll show you in detail later on. Okay, lazy loading, lazy initialization. So we can implement that in our application. Even the relationship management, one to one, one to many, can be done easily in your Hibernate. We have various annotations for that. Okay, we can do easy exception handling also, pagination. All these stuffs can be done more easily in your Hibernate. Now we have the traditional way. Then after traditional way came the Hibernate. Then after Hibernate we will have. So what was the limitation of JDBC? Program had to register the driver, create the connection, make the database table, write the queries, store the responses in result set. All this was done by programmer. Now we will not do all this. All this will be done by the Hibernate for us. Okay. So let's start. So to start the Hibernate program, you have to first download the Hibernate jars. So I have downloaded that. So